Hello, and welcome back to this quiet space, a space designed just for you, for rest and for dreams. Let the edges of your day begin to soften. Let all the sharp lines and loud noises dissolve into a gentle, shimmering haze. All that matters now is the deep comfort of this moment, the rise and fall of your own slow breathing, and the story that is waiting to be told. Allow your eyes to drift closed, heavy, warm, and content. Take a long, slow breath in through your nose, filling your lungs with peace. And as you breathe out through your mouth, release a silent sigh, letting go of everything that is not needed here. Feel your body becoming wonderfully heavy, wonderfully still, as you sink down deeper and deeper into a state of perfect, tranquil rest. Our story tonight begins, as many do, in a time long past. It does not begin with a grand celebration, but in the quiet, dusty corners of a large old house, a house that had forgotten what happiness sounded like. It begins with the soft orange glow of a dying fire and a girl who carried a universe of dreams within her quiet heart. Let your mind drift now into that house, into the warmth of the hearth, and into the beginning of our tale. Chapter 1. The Hearth and the Cinders. Once upon a time, in a grand but silent house, lived a young girl of unparalleled goodness. This gentle temper was a gift from her mother, who had been the kindest person in the world. But after her mother's passing, her father took for his second wife a woman whose heart was as cold and hard as stone. She had 2 daughters of her own who were in every way like their mother, proud, sharp, and unkind. The moment the wedding was over, the house changed. Laughter faded from the hallways, replaced by a heavy silence, broken only by the sharp commands of the stepmother. She could not bear the goodness of the young girl, for it was a quiet light that made the shadows of her own daughters seem all the darker. And so she set out to extinguish that light. She gave the girl the heaviest, most endless tasks in the house. Her life became a quiet rhythm of chores, a meditation of repeated, gentle sounds. Her day began before the sun, in the cold, deep stillness of the great stone kitchen. Imagine her bare feet making a soft padding sound on the cool, smooth flagstones as she moved to the great hearth. There she would kneel. Her first task was always to tend to the fire from the night before, the small broom making a soft sweeping sound as it cleared away the gray, powdery ash. A gentle cloud of dust would rise in the dim light, dancing for a moment before settling again. When her work was done and the chill of the morning had settled deep into her bones, she would often sit down in the chimney corner, right amongst the embers and cinders, seeking the last remnants of warmth. And so, the family mockingly called her Cinder Wench. But the younger stepsister, who was a little less cruel than the elder, called her Cinderella. And even in her ragged dress, her face smudged with soot, Cinderella was 100 times more beautiful than her stepsisters, though they were always draped in magnificent, rustling clothes. Her days became a symphony of quiet, industrious sounds. The rhythmic scrape of a stiff brush against the stone steps, the gentle swirl of soapy water in a heavy wooden bucket, the low, bubbling hum of a great black pot of stew simmering over the fire for the family's dinner. She moved through the large, empty house like a ghost, her presence marked only by the order and cleanliness she left behind. Her own room was a tiny attic at the very top of the house, with a hard straw mattress that made a soft crinkling sound when she moved. Her only companion was a single small window that looked out past the rooftops and up at the stars. But she never complained. She carried her sadness with a quiet grace, finding solace in small, secret comforts. The warmth of the fire on her skin, the company of the little gray mice who would watch her with their tiny, black, bead-like eyes. She would often save a small crumb from her meager meals, placing it on the floor and watching with a gentle smile as they scurried out to claim their prize. And most of all, she found solace in the dreams she allowed herself when the house was finally still and dark. Chapter 2. The Royal Decree. One day, a new sound entered the quiet world of the house. It began as a faint, golden note, far away, carried on the wind, the sound of the royal trumpeter. A little while later, a firm, resonant knock echoed through the heavy oak door. The stepmother opened it to find a royal messenger. He held a large, creamy scroll, tied with a rich blue ribbon. You can almost feel the satisfying weight of it in your hands. And holding it all together, a seal of deep red wax bearing the king's own crest. The king's son, the prince, was holding a magnificent ball, a ball to last for 2 nights, and every person of quality in the land was invited. The stepsisters could hardly contain their excitement. Their voices became a flurry of excited, high-pitched whispers. They snatched the invitation. "We must decide what to wear, the red velvet with the silver thread, or the gown with the golden flowers," the elder sister declared. "I shall wear my necklace of pearls, the one that makes that lovely, soft clicking sound," said the younger. For days, the house was filled with a new kind of chaos. Cinderella was busier than ever. It was she who had to iron her sister's fine linen, the hot iron making a soft hissing sound on the damp cloth. It was she who had to starch their cuffs until they were as crisp as autumn leaves and carefully pleat their delicate ruffles. They spoke of nothing but the ball. Their rooms were a storm of silk and ribbons, and Cinderella moved through it all like a calm, quiet shadow, her hands never still. Chapter 3. A Storm of Silk and Ribbons. Let us linger for a moment in the sisters' chambers on the day of the ball. The air is thick with the scent of rosewater and the fine, dry dust of powdered wigs. Imagine the sounds. The luxurious, whispering hiss of a bolt of silk fabric being unrolled across a bed. The soft, dry rustle of starched petticoats, layer upon layer. The delicate, glassy, crystalline sound of jewels being sorted, a soft, crystalline music as one of the sisters lifted necklaces of pearl and diamond to the light. "Cinderella," one would call, "come and help me with this corset, tighter, tighter." And you can imagine the soft creak of the whalebone stays and the sharp hiss of the laces being pulled taut through the tiny eyelets. "Cinderella," the other would cry, "have you polished my dancing shoes until they shine like mirrors?" And Cinderella's soft, padding footsteps would obey. Her own movements were a quiet counterpoint to their frantic energy. The gentle clink of a needle as she repaired a torn piece of lace, the soft thump of a hot iron on a linen shirt, the quiet, rhythmic snip of tiny scissors trimming a stray thread. She did all of this with a patient heart. She even offered to arrange their hair, which they gladly accepted. And as she worked, brushing their long hair with slow, even strokes, in a soft, repetitive rhythm, they would tease her. "Cinderella, my dear," one sister purred, "would you not like to go to the ball?" "Ah, you are mocking me," Cinderella would say, her voice soft and low. "It is not a place for someone like me." "You are right, of course," they would laugh. People would surely laugh to see a cinder wench at the palace. And Cinderella would simply continue her work, her face calm, hiding the deep, silent ache in her heart. Chapter 4. a wish among the embers. Finally, the evening of the ball arrived. The sisters, dressed in their magnificent rustling gowns, were gone. The heavy sound of the carriage wheels on the gravel faded into the distance, and then silence. A profound quiet settled over the large house. It was a heavy, lonely silence. Cinderella was left all alone. She watched the carriage disappear down the long drive until its lanterns were nothing more than two tiny fading stars. And then she could not hold back her sorrow any longer. She went back to the kitchen, sat down by the hearth, buried her face in her hands, and began to weep. Her sobs were quiet and soft, making almost no sound at all. Her tears fell, hot and silent, onto the cold stone floor by the hearth. One single tear landed on a dying ember, and it hissed for just a moment before it was gone. She sat there for a long time, watching the fire die down, the glowing red embers slowly turning to gray ash. The room grew darker and colder. And in that deep quiet, in that moment of complete despair, she made a wish. She did not speak it aloud. She wished it with her whole heart. A silent, desperate wish to be able to go to the ball, even just for a single hour. Chapter 5, Transformation in the Starlight. And as if in answer to her silent wish, the room began to fill with a soft, silvery light. It was not the light of the fire or the moon. It was a gentle, magical glow that seemed to hum with a quiet energy. Standing before her was a woman, her face kind and crinkled with age, her eyes twinkling like the brightest stars. It was her fairy godmother. "Ah, you wish to go to the ball, do you not?" the fairy asked, and her voice was warm and full of a gentle, bubbling laughter. "Yes," whispered Cinderella, her tears stopping in sheer wonder. "Well then," said the godmother, "you shall go, but first run into the garden and fetch me a pumpkin." Cinderella ran out into the cool night air. The damp grass was soft beneath her bare feet. She chose the finest, roundest pumpkin and carried it back inside, its skin smooth and cool against her own. Her godmother touched the pumpkin with her magic wand, and with a low, shimmering sound, the pumpkin swelled and changed, transforming into a magnificent golden carriage. "Now," said the godmother, "fetch me the mousetrap from the pantry." Inside were 6 little gray mice. The godmother touched each mouse with her wand, and their tiny squeaks deepened into the proud whinnies of 6 splendid gray horses. Then she found a large rat, and with another touch, he became a stout coachman with a magnificent mustache. Finally, 6 lizards from behind the watering can became 6 footmen in green livery who immediately climbed up behind the carriage. "Well," said the fairy, smiling, "now you have a way to go to the ball. Are you not pleased?" "Oh, yes," said Cinderella, "but must I go in these ragged clothes?" Her godmother simply smiled and touched Cinderella with her wand. And in that moment, her ragged gray dress did not just disappear, it seemed to dissolve away like smoke, replaced by a gown of gold and silver cloth woven so finely it seemed to shimmer with captured starlight. On her feet appeared the most beautiful pair of slippers imaginable. They were made of pure, clear glass, and they sparkled and chimed with a soft, crystalline sound with every tiny movement. "Now go," said the godmother, her voice becoming serious. "But remember this, you must leave before the clock strikes midnight. If you stay one moment longer, your carriage will become a pumpkin again, your horses mice, and your beautiful clothes will turn back into rags. Now go." Cinderella, her heart overflowing, stepped into the golden carriage. The door closed with a soft, satisfying click, and the carriage rolled away into the night, as silent as a dream. Chapter 6. A Waltz in Glass Slippers. When Cinderella arrived at the palace, a hush fell over the entire ballroom. The king himself murmured that it had been a long time since he had seen a creature of such grace. The music of the orchestra was a beautiful but muted melody in the background. The true sounds of this scene are much closer, much more intimate. Imagine the sound of Cinderella's own quiet breathing, finally calm and happy. The soft, elegant swish of her magical gown as she moved across the floor. And most enchanting of all, the sound of her glass slippers on the polished marble. It was not a heavy sound, but a delicate, clear, and musical chime, like the ringing of tiny, enchanted bells. The prince was told that a great, unknown princess had arrived. He hurried to greet her. He took her hand, and the entire ballroom seemed to fade away. "May I have this dance?" he asked, and his voice was low and kind, meant only for her ears. He led her onto the dance floor, and as they danced, the only sounds that mattered were the distant, dreamy music, the soft whisper of her dress, and the magical, bell-like chime of her glass slippers with every graceful step. They danced and danced, and the prince would dance with no one else. He led her to a quiet alcove where they shared sweet oranges and candied fruits. He spoke to her in a low, gentle voice, and she answered him, her own voice, so often silent, now full of a quiet, happy confidence. The world outside their small conversation simply ceased to exist. Chapter 7. The Midnight Chimes. Cinderella was so lost in this perfect, timeless moment that she completely forgot the time. She was sitting beside the prince when she heard the first deep, resonant chime of the great palace clock, a sound that echoed through the entire hall. A jolt went through her. Midnight! She jumped up. "I must go," she whispered, her voice full of a sudden urgency. A second chime echoed through the hall. The prince tried to follow, but she was as swift as a deer. She ran from the ballroom, her heart pounding in her chest. Her little glass slippers made a frantic but still musical tapping sound on the marble stairs. As she ran down the grand staircase, in her haste, one of her glass slippers came off and was left behind. She did not dare to stop. She reached the courtyard just as the 12th and final chime began to fade. And as it did, she watched as her magnificent carriage shrank back into a pumpkin. Her horses became 6 little gray mice who scurried away into the night. Her beautiful starlit gown dissolved into her familiar, comfortable rags. All that remained was the other glass slipper, still on her foot. She ran all the way home in the dark, arriving breathless, with nothing left but a memory and a single, perfect, impossible glass slipper. Chapter 8. The Echo of a Glass Slipper. The next day, the prince, who was deeply in love, announced that he would marry none other than the girl whose foot the glass slipper would fit. And so, the Grand Duke began his search. This part of our story is a quiet, repetitive, and lulling rhythm. Imagine the sounds. The carriage stopping, the Duke's men knocking on the door, the creak of the door opening, the Duke's polite, formal, and slightly weary voice. By order of His Royal Highness, every maiden in this house must try on this glass slipper. And then the sound of sighs, the soft rustle of silk as a lady would sit, the gentle, hopeful sound of the slipper being presented, followed by a grunt of effort, a disappointed sigh, and the Duke's final, polite declaration. It does not fit. And so it went from house to house, a gentle, repeating cycle, door after door, lady after lady, always ending with the same quiet words. it does not fit. Finally, the Duke arrived at Cinderella's house. The two stepsisters did everything they could to force their feet into the delicate slipper, but it was no use. The Duke was about to leave when he asked, "Are there no other young women in this house?" "Only a cinder wench in the kitchen," said the stepmother. "Bring her here," the Duke commanded. Chapter 9, The Perfect Sit. Cinderella entered the room. The sisters laughed at her, but she walked with a quiet grace to the chair and sat down. The Duke knelt before her. He took her small, dusty foot in his hand, and then he brought the glass slipper to her foot. There was no pushing, no effort, no sound of a struggle. There was only the softest, smoothest whisper of sound as the slipper seemed to magically glide onto her foot. It fit perfectly. A hushed gasp filled the room. The sisters and the stepmother were stunned into silence, and in that moment of quiet triumph, Cinderella reached into the pocket of her ragged apron and pulled out the other glass slipper, placing it gently on the table beside its twin. Just then, the fairy godmother appeared. With another touch of her wand, Cinderella's rags were once more transformed into a gown even more magnificent than the first. Her stepsisters fell at her feet and begged for her forgiveness. Cinderella, who was as good as she was beautiful, lifted them up, embraced them, and told them that she forgave them with all her heart. She was taken to the palace. The prince, seeing her, knew that she was not only the princess from the ball, but also more beautiful than ever. They were married soon after, and so our story ends. It ends not with a loud celebration, but with a quiet, peaceful happiness. Let your mind rest on this feeling of peace, the feeling of finding where you belong, the feeling of kindness rewarded, and of a dream once wished for among the embers finally coming true. Now just allow the story to fade as you drift away into a deep and wonderfully peaceful sleep. Sleep now. Sleep.